there's a way to make an entrance.
This is my destiny.
It was now a conspiracy of witches.
Download Veely today.
A beautiful old church in rural Iowa with a steeple 30 meters high. Can it be picked up and dragged across the rolling countryside without shattering into 1,000 pieces?
Still looking good. You got 3 feet on that opposite side there.
A fragile chapel nestling in a park in a city by the sea. Is she too frail to be uprooted? Heaven help the team entrusted with her move.
I'm worried about going straight to hell.
Both teams face hazards overhead.
It can arc up to 6 feet. You don't want to be touching anything on there right now.
And on the road below.
Please come to me just a little.
2 colossal churches. 2 teams with a mission to move them. 2 epic endeavors that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. Every day, giant buildings are picked up and moved across the American landscape as if they were toys. But it's a skillful and dangerous business delivering other people's dreams. This house is being moved over 300 kilometers from a city to a rural paradise. The owner of this house wants it shuffled to one corner of his land so that he can build 3 more homes in his garden. He's turning the house round so that the bedrooms will face away from his new neighbors. And the owners of this takeout in Tennessee want it moved to another part of town where the people will hopefully be hungry. But a devout farming community in Iowa is contemplating a move of quite a different order. Built on a hill at the center of this far-flung community, Trinity Lutheran Church has been its spiritual heart for over 100 years. It's a cherished local landmark, one of the first structures the settlers of Lincoln built in 1884. For generations, life has revolved around worship at this altar. Here, the local farmers have blessed their births and marriages and paid their respects to the dead. But the congregation has dwindled from 250 in its heyday to just 13. So to be saved, the church must be closed and moved. Today, its final service is in progress.
But the one thing above all else we must remember is the church moves on. This church doesn't die today, it simply changes places. Today we're celebrating the 125th anniversary of Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church. As much as I have taken care to preach in my sermons that this is only a building, it's a building that their fathers, and their mothers too, have in some cases spilled blood to build. Dear Christians, this church building is closed as a place for divine services. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen.
No longer able to support it, but not prepared to demolish their church, the remaining parishioners have raised the money to have it transported to a town with more worshippers. A wise but painful move.
Oh, I'm sad it's closing, but I'm so happy
that it'll just always be, and I didn't tear it down.
The church needs moving 18 kilometers across rolling countryside to the town of Manning. The road is more suited to carrying a horse and cart than an 85-ton church. The man crazy enough to attempt to move the building, topped with a steeple 30 meters high, is Ron Holland.
If you wanted to relocate this church, there's probably 3 different ways you could do it. One would be to cut it in sections that's small enough to get down the road.
Heavy masonry structures are often dissected into smaller pieces when moved. This Greek Orthodox cathedral in Canton, Ohio, was too small for its congregation of over 300. They called in movers to cut the church into 2 pieces for its move across town to a larger piece of land. The movers left a 15-meter gap in between the two halves to create enough space to accommodate all its new worshippers.
The disadvantage is, of course, the drywall. You got to fix it all back up, re-put the siding on, and reinforce it again back where the cuts were made. So it's a job. The other way would be to tear it down like a carpenter would build it, piece by piece.
Sprawling buildings are often completely dismantled before they are moved. This Tudor pub in Manchester, England, was taken apart plank by plank when it was moved across the city to make way for new shops. But reassembling the 25,000 pieces of the black and white jigsaw took much longer than the movers originally anticipated. The team was fired from the job, and it took the proprietor over 18 months to put the whole pub back together. But Ron's no jigsaw man. He'd rather try and move the whole building in one piece. Fearing for their beloved church, the locals take this news with a mixture of excitement and trepidation.
The thing I'm looking forward to the most is seeing it get safely the first, 300 yards? Whatever it takes to get down this hill and around the corner.
Keeping that thing level enough without coming off, that's got to be a concern.
I just think just seeing it go down the road and having to lift all the wires and make sure there's no trees and, you know, I just think it's going to be awesome just to watch.
2,000 kilometers away on Florida's Gulf Coast, another fine and fragile church is being sized up for relocation. In sunny Sarasota, the property business is booming. Over 40 blocks are being developed in the city to meet the demand for upmarket housing. This is a prime site, but a landmark building stands in the developer's way. Crocker Church is protected from demolition, so the city have pledged to move the church, parish house, and priest to a new site across town.
These are the oldest standing buildings today in Sarasota. When we first came to this section of town in '95, there were drive-by shootings. No cabs would come into the area at night. And over the last 10 years, it has regentrified, and this is very prime property now.
Father Nylon has trusted the work to experienced heavy hauler Brett Johnson.
We've got just a couple of light cracks, but they were here before. See, there's one small hairline crack there. The far corner, see how it's separated?
Brett knows there are always snags with protected buildings. This one is no exception.
Usually, houses have partitions in them, and I wanted to come in and brace this. I wanted to X-brace it, but they wouldn't let me nail anything to the floor because of its historical significance. Without any partitions, you're carrying a big box. I mean, it's just with no structural integrity.
Not only is the church more fragile than he thought, but the route both buildings must travel is packed with obstacles, old and new.
No, I can't drive it straight out. We've got to go out to the north because that's an old historical graveyard. We can't go that way. We can't get down the street. We're on Florida Avenue here, they call this, but there's poles on each side of the street and we can't get between the poles. You see, or we'd have overhead lines in the way.
The church is 20 meters long. This will make negotiating corners through over a kilometer of city streets extremely difficult. And somehow Brett will have to get both buildings onto Route 41, one of the main roads linking Sarasota to Miami. Blocking it would cause gridlock. Brett wants to dismantle the church to make the move easier, but fears the wood might splinter.
The nails are old, and it's got old, what they call heart pine, old Florida pine. They were virgin trees. And when you put nails in that and then the wood dries, you can't disassemble it and reassemble it.
A more radical option would be to airlift the church across the city.
You could take a helicopter and try and pick a structure up and fly it from lot to lot. And a helicopter will pick up a 100-ton tank because it's such a concentrated load. But if you try and hook a helicopter to a building like this, the rotor blast is counteracting what you're trying to pick up.
Air forced down by the helicopter's rotors would push against the long expanse of roof, making liftoff difficult. So Brett's only option is to try to squeeze the church through the city intact. The project is fraught with difficulty. The triangular porch at the front of the church is supported by 4 columns firmly anchored into the ground. If Brett attempts to lift the church with the columns in place, they could drag the porch off the building. So he plans to take the columns out and replace them with T-braces secured to the top of the lifting beams. These will ensure that the forces are equally distributed when he lifts the building. Day one, Brett goes to work. It takes 4 hours to jack the building up off its foundations. So far, so good.
Really, we're at about 20 inches, it looks like now. We only need a little over 30 to put our wheels in, so this one more push-up and we'll be ready for wheels then.
Now comes the first difficult bit. This church was not built upon rock, but in a bed of sand. Despite the jacking, it still sits in a deep hole. In theory, the best way of dragging it out would be to lay down a road of wooden planks in line with its entrance and pull it straight out. But the graveyard, with its sanctified ground and protruding headstones, lies directly opposite. The only other way out is through a gap in the trees to the side of the church. To get it through, the team will have to try to precision turn the wheels to spin the church around through 90 degrees. Once turned, they hope to have enough space to build the road and winch the church out of the hole.
Before we pull out of here, we'll actually turn it 90 degrees, and then we're going to pull it down the road backwards. Basically, with the front will be the rear going down the road. That way, when we pull onto the new lot, we can drive straight in.
Turning the church round is easier said than done. They start to spin the outside wheels around a central set that have been anchored with wooden chocks. It takes an hour to rotate the church through 2 meters. They daren't go any faster. The wheels could veer off onto the uneven sandy ground and sink. After 8 hours, Brett is pleased with his progress.
We're coming up a pretty hard incline. It's almost up out of the hole, we call it. You know, you start with a house in the hole, we're bringing it up, so it's just about to come up the hill there now.
Before the final pull, they savage the neighbor's fence and trees to clear the route in front of them. They take the strain. And finally, up it comes out of the hole. But now the real problems start. Brett thinks the steeple may be too fragile for the trip across the city. Back in Iowa, Ron Holland is contemplating how his team is going to lift and shift their 85-ton church. They've ordered 14 steel beams that they will use to construct a rig to lift the church off its foundations and slide it to the roadside. But this building presents particular problems. The church is not evenly balanced. The front has the steeple, the organ, and a balcony, and is much heavier than the rear altar end. Furthermore, the floor is raked at an angle so that worshippers at the back can see the altar. If they were to raise the church up unevenly, the steeple could exert fatal pressure on the walls and roof. To compensate for this, they'll have to set the steel lifting beams underneath the church at exactly the right angle with the ground to create a wedge, so that when the jacks are operated, the church lifts evenly.
You know, the floor's angled down like most churches. You know, when you walk on the inside of a church, it goes down about 3 foot to the front. And that's what makes it hard for us to be able to shim it all at the same, so we're lifting all at the same time. We have to shim that 3 feet compared to the other end, hardly anything at all.
Inside the church, there's another problem. The haulers are unsure whether the ornate stained glass windows will survive the road trip, but they are reluctant to remove them. The problem is that the church is so long that its thin walls will bend and twist en route, which will put pressure on the glass. Traditional plate glass windows are often taken out of buildings before they are moved. It's recognized they won't survive the snaky undulations of a rough journey. But the windows of Trinity Church are different. The stained glass has been secured into position with malleable lead. The movers are gambling that they will be flexible enough to bend with the church rather than shatter, but they can't be sure. As an extra precaution, they decide to insert a second layer of steel beams under the floor to give the church extra rigidity.
The cross beams are going to be wider than the church. Basically, you want to be sure and get out to the outside sill of the church. And so I've got longer ones than what is really needed. And that will help strengthen that so you don't get a racking motion in it.
But just as they finish securing these lifting beams, they hit a new problem. They discover that the wood at the base of the steeple is completely rotten.
I'm not sure if it's just from dry rot or just rotting out, or if termites got in here. No, it's not termites, it's dry. It's dry rot. Okay. From the steps out here, the water used to run down and get back between them. And it just stayed there, and it just slowly got them rotten over the past 100 years. We're going to cut these old bridge planks to fit in here, and then shim up underneath to get everything tight and solid again.
Doing the repair sets them back half a day. It takes them a week on site before they are ready to jack up the church. Over the course of the day, the church rises up 2 meters into the air. But now it gets more difficult. How to slide the church sideways through the air onto firm ground to the point where a truck can pick her up. First, they must build 3 piers or cribs to support 3 super strong steel beams for the church to slide across. Each beam is 17 meters long and must be perfectly aligned with its neighbor.
We're measuring the distance from the last beam to this front beam so that the beams are straight, so the church sits straight on the beams, not crooked. We like it flat, level, so that way it won't roll back or forward when we're pulling it.
But how will they actually slide the 85-ton church across such narrow beams? The answer is to use a special set of wheels.
It's called a heavy haul skate, and it's going to roll the church from there over to these cribs here. It's a little heavy, so give me just a second here. It's real heavy. It weighs about 200 pounds. And these will go on each crib that we built underneath there. One to the far crib, one to this crib. And then we're going to make sure these are nice and square, even, off each edge of this beam.
This is what's supposed to happen. 2 sets of rollers will be placed under the church on each beam. 2 trucks positioned at the side of the church will then winch the front and rear simultaneously. It's critical that both ends of the church roll at exactly the same speed to keep the building at a perfect right angle to the beams. But it won't be easy. The front steeple end of the church is much heavier than the rear. If the back travels faster than the front, the rollers could run loose and the church would slide off the rig.
It's a lot of weight going to be coming this way.
They set the church rolling, but immediately their worst fears are realized.
Hold up, Ernie. I'm still moving this way. Everything's heading that direction.
The rear of the church starts to roll, but the front with the heavy steeple is refusing to budge. This makes the rear rollers career off towards the very edge of their beam. They must reset the rollers at the center of the beam, or the church could fall off the rig. Some hopeful hits with a 10-pound hammer aren't going to make much impact on the 12-ton steeple overhead. It takes 2 hours to get the jacks out and reposition the rollers by hand. Eventually, they're ready for another go. The winches take the strain, and this time, the miracle happens. the steeple keeps pace with the rest of the church, and Trinity rides gracefully through the air across the ring. But the steeple has proved to be a dangerous liability. They are not sure they can risk moving such an unbalanced load across rough country roads unless they cut it off. Back in Sarasota, Brett has steeple problems of his own. He fears the steeple on his church is too fragile to survive the move if he leaves it in place, but it may fall apart if it's removed. He decides to risk taking it down.
My guys are up there just bracing it up. We're kind of beefing it up a little bit so it doesn't crush. They're nailing some cross supports in there.
Brett thinks the safest way to lift the steeple off intact will be to use a crane. He plans to thread 2 straps underneath its base and then to hoist it vertically off the roof. But its base is weak, and its decorative louvered sides are equally flimsy. If left unbraced, the force of lifting could rip through the base and destroy the tower. So Brett's team must build a rigid platform around the tower's base. This spreads the lifting force across a larger area and protects the steeple. But once off the roof, Brett knows the 6-meter tower will be dangerously unstable and could fall out of the rig. The only way to reach and secure the top of the tower would be to fly a man up there on a wire and lower him down using the crane. He could then wrap a belt around the tower whilst ensuring that the main lifting straps are kept vertical. In theory, the tower could then be gently lifted to the ground. Preparing to fly is rigger Andrew Goodman.
And in theory, we are secure.
In theory.
Crane operator Steve Farah hoists Andrew 15 meters into the air like a fish on a line.
I'm scared. Someone help.
Then he gently lowers Andrew down behind the crucifix to avoid tangling his ropes or impaling him on the cross. The sharply raked roof makes touchdown tricky.
Right now, they're just going to hook it all up, and then we're going to have to snug up the straps, then he's going to put that ratchet strap on.
Both lifting straps have to be adjusted to exactly the same length to guarantee an even lift.
I'm going to pull up. You stay in the center, maintain your elevation.
From the crane, Steve tensions the belts, and from his high vantage point, Andrew can guide him.
The outside strap is shorter, so it wants to come this way.
The strap length is not exactly right, so we can't shorten our strap, so we're going to use shackles and just lengthen the ones that are apparently just a tad short so that we lift it completely straight.
Cutting the longer strap down to size might weaken it, so they hook extra belting to the shorter strap to extend it.
He's checking the tension on the straps now to make sure that when we do lift, that we lift evenly on all 4 corners.
1 more or 2 more?
They spend an hour fine-tuning until they think they've got it right.
I don't know, this is pretty tight over here.
It's looking good right now. He'll tell me if it's good enough.
Andrew secures the tower top with a ratchet belt.
What's going to happen is the whole thing is going to lift away from the building. The top is unsecured, but now that we have this strap, in theory, the whole thing will be contained by this one strap.
Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. We're going to lift it a little bit.
The moment of truth.
Up it comes. Nice and smooth, completely controlled.
Steve handles the steeple as gently as a crate of eggs.
It was good. It went real well. We didn't crush anything, did we? I like that. We need to pick it up. They forgot to leave it for the straps. You need a bar, Jesse?
And now for the parish house. Andrew's first job, to remove the cross from its roof, has him feeling distinctly uneasy.
Okay, is the sky going black? Okay. Please forgive me.
Andrew feels better once the cross is safely restored to Father Nylon. As church and house are prepared for moving, the steeple is taken on ahead to check out the 1 kilometer route. Brett has trouble maneuvering even this modest load through the streets of Sarasota. They have to zigzag to avoid hitting traffic lights.
You got it. You come straight. You got it, Kyle.
Push wires up out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead, folks. Go ahead. Come on. Go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am.
They even fall foul of wet paint on the road.
Oh my gosh, look at my tires. Where'd the yellow paint come from?
But both church and parish house are far longer, taller, wider, and heavier than this trivial load. The most difficult part of the move is about to begin. In Iowa, Art is still not sure what to do about Trinity's cumbersome 30-meter tall steeple.
There's kind of two options. One of them is to leave the steeple on. The other one is to take and cut it off at the roof line and lift it off with a crane and then reassemble it. The advantages of is it would lighten the front up considerably, but then it is going to leave the steeple open to the weather if you can't get it sealed up good enough.
But severing this particular steeple would have serious consequences. In 1913, a tornado struck the church. When it was completely rebuilt, the connection between church and steeple was deliberately strengthened to withstand any future storms. The connection between steeple and tower is made by a square of solid wooden beams ½ meter thick. Metal ties secure this joint. If they were to sever the steeple above this sill, the huge hollow spire would lose all its strength and deform. But if they cut off the spire below the sill, the cavernous bell tower would be weakened. So they have no option but to risk the journey with the steeple intact.
But then leaving it on with that added weight, I've got to put extra wheels in. So tomorrow we'll be putting a T-iron and 2 more sets of dollies up front there.
Art's team will now have to design a unique wheel layout under the church that can take the steeple's extra weight.
Yep.
Ideally, they'd like to use just 4 sets of wheels. The fewer wheels they use, the easier and faster it will be to get the load round tight corners. But the weight of the steeple is so heavy and localized that the front wheels could sink into the gravel road. To prevent this from happening, they will have to place 2 extra sets of wheels directly under the steeple. This will spread the weight of the church over a larger area and will protect the road, but it will make cornering more laborious.
We've tried to divide the weight, the total weight up into thirds. It's 1/3 here and 1/3 here and 1/3 here.
With 62 wheels in place under the rig, the team makes sure everything inside is secure for the move tomorrow.
Everything looks good here. I don't think we're going to interfere with anything here.
Okay.
I think we're in good shape there, don't you, Russ?
I think so, too.
After weeks of hard work, Trinity is finally ready for the road. Tonight's the night for Brett in Sarasota. He's been told he'll have to move his 2 buildings in the middle of the night to avoid jamming up the city roads. He's taken the bad news well and has made some special door tags to warn locals.
It's just to let people know, if they're not home, that we've been moving a house down your street in the morning.
When are you moving in?
We're leaving over on 10th at 2 in the morning.
Super, I can guarantee you my wife I'll be on church on time.
Oh, there you go.
Brett can't start before 2 a.m., but his permit expires at 6. If the church and parish house are not through the city by then, he may never be allowed to work here again. His first task is to guide both buildings up the city streets to Route 41, but this won't be easy. The route is lined with traffic light arms that have been specially built to survive hurricanes, so they cannot be removed. To get around the first set of lights, he must haul the convoy across the center of the road and onto the opposite sidewalk. There will be very little clearance as he snips through. Brett tries to explain his problems to the police.
Hey, I tell you what we got to do. The way these light arms are laid out, we got to cross the curb, go over to the westbound side, and when we get in the middle of Coconut, then we'll cross over. We'll miss those light arms. You'll see we'll cross over the street, I think, and then we'll have to cross back over the curb to get on the right side. Hopefully we can do it in a couple hours. I'd like to be off the road by 4 and go to breakfast early. I'd love to see that. Watch that chimney, Joe. Just keep it steady.
They ease their path across the center of the road by building a ramp from wooden boards. Both buildings are extremely fragile, and a sudden jolt could loosen an entire wall.
And it needs to come to me just a little. Is that what you did? Okay.
Brett's son, Kyle, motors the house up front.
Trying to ease them along real slow so they can keep up with it.
While Jesse wrangles the church. The heavy humidity drains their energy.
Boy, it's hotter than hell in here. Chimney's sticking up pretty far.
After a grueling 30 minutes, they manage to get through just one set of lights. But Brett seems happy.
Looks like we're running pretty good, doesn't it? Just for eyeballing it on the lot. Doing good.
But up ahead lies the turn onto Route 41. This junction has 4 light arms, and the road corners are blocked with lamps. The loads are too long to turn onto Route 41 at this corner. So Brett's team will have to zigzag across Route 41 and drive their trucks off-road into Centennial Park to begin the second stage of the move. It's 3 a.m., and as the convoy crawls up to the junction, Brett has a new worry. He now thinks the church may be too long to shoot the gap.
Church is about 65 foot, so we don't have a whole lot of maneuvering room there when we cross over. We're gonna have to jump up on the curb here.
All right, on the right side? All right.
To make sure we miss that arm. We've got to get far over to the right and jump up on the sidewalk a little bit to make sure that the 2-story misses this light arm here, so we've got another arm to miss.
With 4 light arms to snake around, everyone's attention focuses upwards. Brett keeps an eye on the window as it scrapes by the first lights.
Let's see, I'll tell you when your dolly's there. You've still got about 15 feet to go, Kyle. I think you're good here.
But just as the parish house clears the obstacles in the air, it runs into problems on the ground. No one saw this fire hydrant coming.
Gotta get the jack machine and jack it up. We're gonna hit this fire hydrant out here. Lacking a few inches, so.
Meanwhile, Jesse's easing the church up onto the sidewalk to miss the first set of lights, but he too runs into problems. With over 50 tons pressing down on these tires, running over the bolts in this road sign base would cause a blowout, and their makeshift ramp is collapsing. Both buildings are now blocking Route 41, the interstate highway, and the police are fretting.
All
time is 3:46. So what, 15 minutes they've moved it 5 feet.
With time pressing, Brett races in the jacking machine to raise the house away from the hydrant.
Lines up to the dolly. We can push it up and get over the fire hydrant. Okay.
They pull clear, but the setback has cost them 30 precious minutes.
Got it made. Got it made.
Meanwhile, Kyle and Bo build up the ramp under their truck wheels to get the church moving again.
Come on, starting to turn now. I'm gonna make it.
With both buildings rolling free, they complete the zigzag across the 41 and pull into Centennial Park. They've made it halfway, but now have just under 2 hours left to complete their journey. It's 8 a.m. in Iowa and the day of the big move. Ron alerts his team to the dangers of the 18-kilometer journey ahead.
The route, I think we've all went through the route. The trees have already been trimmed. We do have some hills that's going to give us possibly some problems. There's some real rolling hills. That's when we'll need to hook the tractor up, so we'll use the tractor only on the hills when we need it. One other thing we want to discuss, Ole always carries a hammer or something, and if there's anything you see that isn't right or an obstacle or whatever it is, tap on the beam and that vibrates right up through the truck. The truck driver knows immediately he'll stop.
The local police have given Ron the 10 hours until sunset to complete the move. His first challenge is to guide the church down the steep hill to the main road. It's a tight squeeze past the electric pylons lining both sides of the road. The church roof and steeple are topped with steel, and Ernie's particularly worried about the danger they pose.
You wouldn't want to touch any part of that church right now. Because it could be energized from that pole, even without touching. It can arc up to 6 feet. It'll energize that church, any part of it, even the wood. So you don't want to be touching anything on there right now. Not when we're that close.
They creep down the slope at a snail's pace. A sudden jolt down this 10% gradient could loosen the steeple. They make it to the main road without incident. Here, the road turns sharply to the left. Ron now has to work out the best way of steering his unwieldy cargo around the corner.
I'm thinking we should keep the truck over close to that grab, but not so far that you're going to slide either, Art, you know, because it might be hard to back this thing up the hill.
To help keep the church on course, the rear wheels are connected by a steel spacer bar. It's tensioned precisely, allowing enough give for the wheels to follow the direction of the truck without veering off course. But the corners of the road are too tight for the wheels to get round with the spacer bar in place. So at each junction, they must be disconnected. They loosen the chains locking the wheels together and turn them round by hand through a tighter arc. With the wheels free steering, they can make much sharper turns. But the team must be vigilant. If the wheels spin too far, they will become difficult to realign once round the corner.
If I want to turn to the left, I come over here to this one that's on the left-hand side as you're backing up, and you tighten this one, loosen that one, and the dollies will come left. If you want to go right, it's just reversed. You go over there, tighten that one, loosen this one, and it will steer. So you can steer the back end.
After each corner, they must reconnect the bar to keep the wheels properly aligned on the straight sections of road.
You want them chained up tight or just
No,
chained?
just like we are. I think that'll be good enough.
The church is much wider than the country roads, so an advance party goes ahead to clear the roadside. They haul road signs clear of the steelwork protruding under the church.
Watch your windows, guys.
Tighter.
Oh!
They take no prisoners. Trees that stand in their way are totaled.
Everybody might want to move. They're going to push the tree this way, okay?
A crew of 12 electricians stand by to cut any offending wires clear of the steeple.
Close off this line for you guys to get under.
It's critical they keep the church level, or the steeple could work itself loose away from the main structure. The hydraulic wheels automatically compensate for small bumps and dips, but they must stop at steeply banked corners to level the load precisely.
We're on 3 points, so it'll follow the terrain of the road because the ground is never flat. You know, so it's got to be, the church is staying flat, so it'll lean, it'll follow the terrain of the ground up the hills, down the hills, the side a little bit, to the other side a little bit, yeah. It's got to be made to do that, or you'll twist the building, you'll rack the building.
An hour into the journey, they come to a halt at the foot of the first major hill. There's loose gravel on the road, so they may not get up it.
Gravel has a tendency to lose traction. It'll slip because it's like you're driving on marbles. You don't get the traction as if you were on blacktop concrete.
Ollie has persuaded a local farmer to lend some extra pulling power.
We don't know which hill we need help with until we get there because we're not from here, I'm sorry to say.
With the extra 450 horsepower hooked to the truck, they begin the ascent.
I don't even know what it weighs, but it's got to be heavy. Plenty of power, plenty of traction. We shouldn't have any trouble.
Once back on the flat roads, they pick up speed. It takes the whole morning to reach the halfway mark, but they'll have to do better than this if they're going to deliver the church on time. In Sarasota, Brett's church and parish house are still stuck in the park, waiting to get onto Route 41. He's 2 hours away from violating the terms of his permit, and there's a worrying problem under his feet.
There's a big storm drain that goes under here, and it's right under that sidewall, so all the water drains through here.
There's no direct exit from Centennial Park onto Route 41. Their only option is to drive over the ditch and sidewalk onto the road. But directly under the sidewalk is a network of hollow storm drains used to channel floodwater away from the city. If they were to drive the 50-ton church and parish house over this path, there's a risk the drains could collapse under their weight. So they will have to build a reinforced road over the sidewalk from steel plates. This will spread the load over a larger area and will make the journey across the ditch smoother.
Right there.
They start to lay the plates down, but each weighs over half a ton, and it all takes valuable time. The trucks finally roll down onto Route 41 with just 90 minutes to go before their road permit expires.
If we get on 12th, we're gonna be home free then. No, I'll feel better to get off the state road. We've got till 6. What, we got 4:30 now?
Yeah.
Right.
4:30.
Crossing the center of the road for a second time slows them further, but the wide highway allows Kyle and Jesse to pick up speed. They keep both the buildings close together as they shuffle up the highway.
4:48, it's 10 till. We've got an hour now. We've gotten through most of our obstacles. We just got this, man, it's gonna be a pretty hard turn on the 12th.
They reach their highway exit at 5 a.m., but the turnoff is sharp and their slow progress is worrying the police.
It's 5 o'clock.
And?
And they're not done.
It takes 30 minutes to haul the house clear of the highway and onto the side road, but the church is still behind. The morning traffic is building up and the police are having to direct cars away from the highway they're blocking. The moment the church clears the near side of the highway, the police reopen it to traffic.
What time is it? We close to 6 yet? Well, we got 5 minutes to get off the road.
So close to being out of the road yet so far. I don't know why they've stopped there. It looked like they were on a roll there.
They must shuffle the house further down the side road before the church can move any further. But trees are blocking its path.
Okay, Jesse. Let's get this bad boy out of the road. All right, we're ready.
Just after 6 a.m., the church leaves the highway.
Yeah. All right, getting the order to open the highway. We're done.
We're out of the road now.
Both buildings finally reach their destination as day breaks.
Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
All right.
Good man.
Thank you, Jim.
We appreciate it.
Crocker Church is saved. The steeple soon reclaims its rightful position, and the church is restored to its former glory. It's 1 p.m. in Iowa, and Trinity is on a roll. The team pick up the pace to 6 kilometers an hour and race to get it to its new home by sunset. Captain Lance Evans arrives to escort the church on the final leg of its journey.
We don't normally do things this big. We've moved all sorts of things from windmills to boats to houses to and now churches.
The good people of Manning are overwhelmed to receive this very special present from across the prairies.
I've never seen something this big go across my house before.
This is just fantastic to move that big thing.
Bet if any of these people are from the big cities, they think, look at those hicks. They think this is a big deal.
100 years of church discovered.
We're going to attempt to go over the bridge, which is going to be the interesting part of the whole turn.
Still looking good. You got 3 feet on that opposite side there.
Into town on 60 wheels. Surface out for eternity. For eternity, for eternity, for eternity, for eternity, for eternity, for eternity, for eternity.
After 6 hours, Ron's team guide Trinity up the hillside to its new home.